Hey there, self-care warriors. Have you ever wondered about the parallels between pickup artists and narcissists? There are actually a lot of techniques that pickup artists use that narcissists also use. Now, I think that happens for a variety of reasons. You could speculate that some pickup artists are narcissists themselves, and they've learned the tool of the trade organically by conning and manipulating others for a lifetime, and they have decided to pass on those manipulation tactics to the public. And then you can also argue that narcissistic individuals tend to gravitate towards pickup artistry and pickup artist societies as a way to hone their craft of manipulation. You can also argue that just like any kind of community, there are both narcissists and empathic people who are drawn to it for very different reasons. Now, I'm not claiming that all pickup artists are narcissists or sociopaths or even psychopaths. What I am claiming is that these types of communities are definitely filled with toxic individuals, just like any other community. And you can argue that because this type of community is based on manipulation and conning others for profit and personal pleasure and personal gain and a personal agenda, that there probably are a lot more narcissistic individuals in those communities than other types of communities that might be more geared towards helping others or educating people about the dangers of psychopathy, for example. But just like any community, there can be predators, and I think that the pickup artist community is definitely one that is very interesting to explore. So let's talk about some of the techniques that narcissists use that are very similar to pickup artists. And just like any other predator out there, whether you're a sociopath, a psychopath, or a narcissist who's conning others and trying to deplete others and drain others and exploit others for your own personal gain, you are going to be drawn to communities that teach you manipulation. You're going to be drawn at a very young age to learn all you can about the art of manipulation, because that's where your mindset already resides, right? That's where your entire perspective on life is grounded in the manipulation of others. So I do believe that even though narcissists definitely have a few more sophisticated tactics in their arsenal that have nothing to do with pickup artistry, I do think that a lot of these techniques that they use overlap. They're just called by different names and they are executed for different reasons. So let's talk about some of the techniques that pickup artists use that overlap with those of narcissists and sociopaths and psychopathic predators. Again, you may be on the receiving end of a pickup artist who is a psychopath, who is a narcissist and a sociopath who is using these techniques. I've heard from many survivors who have had exes that read The Game by Neil Strauss or The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene, and they were basically using those as their playbook to seduce others. So don't be surprised if the person who is using these pickup artist techniques is in fact a toxic individual. Now, they may not be toxic. They may just be a person who feels like they don't have any other way to, I don't know, talk to women or talk to men or whoever they're trying to pick up, and they're using these techniques as a last resort. So again, not all people who use these techniques are narcissists, but I do think that using these can be a narcissistic act based on how you execute them and how you approach them, right? Because some people use these techniques as openers, as ways to flirt. But again, I do think that that's very misguided, because there are ways to flirt and create rapport and create tension, sexual tension, and healthy sexual tension and attraction, an element of desire and attraction without resorting to pickup artistry. So let's talk about these 5 techniques. I've actually explored them in a recent Psych Central article, so even though I'm going to be going over them briefly here, please do know that you can find an in-depth description of each technique in the article, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. So the first technique that I want to talk about is negging. Negging is a way to covertly insult a victim so that they are more vulnerable to your advances. This is a way to undermine someone's confidence in a very subtle way. And it can be subtle depending on who uses it, but let's say that a person tries to pick you up at a bar. They might come up to you and they may say something arrogant and condescending like, "Oh, if you're lucky, I may just buy you a drink." Or they might say, You know, your earrings are really nice. I think my grandmother has them. And so this is just a way to kind of get underneath your skin, poke fun at you, and to provoke you into responding. So someone with maybe perhaps lower self-esteem might be malleable enough to respond in a way that's outraged or engage with that person or try to win their approval. And people with trauma histories who have that kind of fawn response, who have the need to please, really need to watch out for negging and covert insults, whether they are used by a narcissist or your garden variety player who's using pickup artistry, because negging is very much like the covert insults that narcissists throw at us, right, in the abuse cycle. It's a way to test your boundaries. It's a way to poke at you and say, are you going to respond? Are you going to engage? What are you going to do next? Are you going to try to please me because I've put myself above you in this neg? And negging is usually used with highly attractive individuals or individuals that the negger perceives to be out of their league. So it's a way to put you down a notch or two, right? Because if done skillfully enough, the woman who's always used to being complimented and fawned over feels like she's been attacked, and she feels like, well, this guy isn't fawning over me. What's different about him? I'm going to see, you know, where his mindset is at. So that's really the psychology of negging, is that these pickup artists believe that if you neg an attractive woman, that perhaps, you know, she will be drawn to you because she finds you a challenge. She finds you to be exciting and more of a challenge than, you know, people that are fawning over you or complimenting you excessively, are praising you. Interestingly enough, research and studies have shown that women specifically who have their self-esteem lowered tend to find a male stranger more attractive. So if research is showing that negging can actually be effective, you better watch out for it, because no matter how high your self-esteem is, if done artfully enough, if done skillfully enough by a predator, it can actually get inside your head and it can mess with it, even if it's temporarily. Another research study showed that people who have their self-esteem lower tend to be more compliant and agreeable to requests. So if you have someone who's covertly insulting you at a bar or wherever they're choosing to try to pick you up, you might actually go along with it, and you might feel compelled to give them your number, you know, depending on whether or not you can be played and how susceptible you are to these types of insults, right? Now, I know there are people who will claim, well, that's not how negging works. It's supposed to be subtle. It's not supposed to be insulting. It's just supposed to be playful and teasing. But a lot of pickup artists don't use negging in an effective way. I know, because I've heard a lot of horror stories about negging gone wrong and how people really legitimately get offended by it. If you are being negged, just do take it as a compliment, because this is a person who thinks that you're out of their league and they're trying to put you down a notch or two, to get you off your pedestal for a bit and kind of see whether or not you're going to be responsive and receptive to them. Consider it a compliment. They're willing to stoop so low to bring you low, albeit a very backhanded compliment. A second technique that both pickup artists and narcissists share is the manufacturing of love triangles. Now, in the narcissist survivor community, we call this triangulation. In Robert Greene's book, The Art of Seduction, he talks about manufacturing love triangles as a way to seem desirable, as a way to create an aura of desirability. So Robert Greene writes in his book, The Art of Seduction, which is used by a lot of pickup artists and players and seducers, people who are trying to be the modern day Casanova. He writes, "Few are drawn to the person whom others avoid and neglect. People gather around those who have already attracted interest. To draw your victims closer and to make them hungry to possess you." Notice the wording there, the language there. It's almost like this predator is, you know, being devoured. "You must create an aura of desirability, of being wanted and courted by many. It will become a point of vanity for them to be the preferred object of your attention, to win you away from a crowd of admirers. Build a reputation that precedes you. If many have succumbed to your charms, there must be a reason." So again, when we talk about triangulation, it's all about creating that sense of competition that Robert Greene describes in his book, The Art of Seduction. And books like The Game by Neil Strauss and, you know, pickup artists in general tend to promote this idea of creating these love triangles, of creating the sense of competition, of people throwing themselves at you, people being attracted to you, everyone always admiring you or crushing on you, just so you can seem as if you are something very special. The way your target is led to believe that you are something that needs to be possessed, you are someone who is important enough to possess. And creating that aura of desirability is one of the ways that both narcissists and pickup artists can compel you to chase after them, can compel you to compete for them, can compel you to bend over backwards trying to please them. But again, it's a very sick way to get into someone's head, because if you're always competing, then there is really no time to establish that kind of intimacy that's needed in a relationship. And really, a worthy partner would never make you compete for their attention or affection. They would instead give you that, and they would never make you feel insecure. They would never manufacture these insecurities and make you jealous on purpose just to have you compete, to feed your insecurities regarding the relationship. Instead, they would make you feel cherished and secure. And so that is where triangulation and manufacturing these love triangles, even if they might be effective for some, they fall flat and they fall short of establishing true intimacy and doing so with integrity. The third technique that both pickup artists and narcissists share is premature disclosure and intimacy. Pickup artists have what is called the 7-hour rule. They suggest that a pickup artist spend 7 hours at least with their selected prey, their target, before they go in for the close, which is pretty much they want to sleep with that target. And so spending these long hours on a first date or split between dates can ensure that the pickup artist has enough time to assess their victim, to learn more about their victim. They will use premature intimacy or disclosure, personal disclosure of intimate detail from their personal lives, to accelerate that sense of trust in the victim. And the victim in turn is convinced that they should disclose too, because if you have someone who's telling you about their life experiences early on, you feel connected to them. You know, there's that study that's done where people fall in love by just looking at each other and making eye contact and sharing their most intimate vulnerabilities and experiences. So pickup artists know that, and so they do rush that. They do manufacture this sense of intimacy that doesn't exist yet by telling these stories about themselves, about their lives, about their vulnerabilities, or their, fake vulnerabilities, whatever will get them into that prey's head. And this is a strategic move to increase a sense of trust in the victim. Because if the victim feels comfortable enough to disclose about themselves, then the pickup artist knows that they have an opening to try to get them into bed or whatever else their agenda might be. And narcissists do this in spades in the beginning of relationships, right? You have narcissists who are willing to disclose about their exes quite frequently in the beginning of dates, and we don't know how much of what they say is actually true or false. Usually it's false. Usually it's a story filled with a lot of malignant projections and smear campaigns and calling the victim crazy or obsessed or clingy, and telling lies about the victim. But again, they do have that sense of premature intimacy where they disclose things early on to their victim. The victim in turn feels like they can trust the narcissist and they disclose things. And a narcissistic or sociopathic individual is using this kind of 7-hour rule or whatever else the amount of time might be. It's usually a very lengthy amount of time that they try to spend on dates, and in the grooming and honeymoon phase, they want to spend a lot of time with you excessively. They want to contact you 24/7. They want to communicate with you 24/7. It's a time of excessive attention, right? The grooming and idealization and honeymoon stage is a time of excessive attention, of praise, of love bombing and idealization. And so when they're doing this, they are setting their victims up. They're using that premature intimacy and disclosure as a way to assess the vulnerabilities and weaknesses of their victims and to learn more about them early on. And it can almost feel like an interrogation if not done skillfully enough, because the sociopath wants to find as much about you as possible so that they can use those details against you as ammunition. They can use it to morph into the person that you're hoping for, into the savior and shining armor that you're hoping will rescue you. But they will also use those sorts of fears and vulnerabilities against you in order to manipulate you in the abuse cycle. In order to counteract this method, really you have to resist disclosing personal details early on. If you're on a first or second date, try not to disclose anything that could be used against you, whether it's your childhood traumas or fears or something that an ex did to you in the past, because these sick individuals can use that against you to re-traumatize you. And if you're a pickup artist and you're, preying on someone, you may not use it against the victim in a long-term relationship, but you may use it in order to get the victim into bed, whatever, short-term agenda you have. And so when you are learning more about that victim's insecurities and vulnerabilities, you can easily use that information against the victim in order to cater to their needs, and temporarily at least, and then pull the rug underneath them and manipulate them further. So just be wary if you're on the receiving end of premature intimacy, fast forwarding, rushing things, rushing these kind of details that would only be disclosed maybe months into dating or years into marriage, things that you wouldn't tell, a huge room of strangers. Maybe don't say that on the first date. Maybe don't disclose that. And be very wary of anyone who is disclosing personal details on a first date, because that usually means that there's something off there. Either they're not emotionally available enough to understand boundaries, or they are predatory and they want to learn more about you. So they're disclosing things about themselves in the hope that you will disclose back to them. Now, the fourth technique that both pickup artists and sociopaths share is emotional anchoring and seduction withdrawal. Now, emotional anchoring refers to a neuro-linguistic programming technique, NLP, in which an internal response becomes associated with an external or internal trigger. So this is very much like Pavlov's dogs and conditioning, right? When you are conditioned to associate a trigger, whether it's outside of you or inside of you, with a response, then you are basically being brainwashed in a sense to respond in a certain way whenever that stimulus is presented to you. So an emotional anchor is any kind of trigger or stimulus that can retrieve some sort of emotional state, whether it's a state of pain or pleasure or excitement. Emotional anchors depend on repetition, which means that the anchor is repeatedly associated with whatever emotional state you're trying to connect it to. Uniqueness, the anchor should be unique so that it doesn't get triggered too often. So you can't have an anchor that gets triggered all the time, right? So let's say your anchor is the color red. Well, you could run into the color red at any point of the day. So if you're trying to anchor yourself deliberately to something, it probably shouldn't be something as commonplace or everyday as the color red. Intensity, the anchor is created during intense emotional moments, right? So the strength of your anchor actually depends on whether or not you have been anchored within a moment of intense emotion. So if you're feeling incredibly elated, that's a great time to create an anchor. And narcissists and pickup artists know this. That's why they tend to create anchors during times of peak emotional intensity, like when you are in the throes of pleasure or in pain. So it's important to remember that these anchors can be anything. They could range from gestures, a certain tone of voice that triggers you, a scent, a physical movement, a place where someone touches you, a certain location, a song. Anything can be anchored. Narcissists use general emotional anchoring and conditioning throughout the abuse cycle to associate pain and pleasure and get you addicted to them. Pickup artists primarily use emotional anchors to retrieve and make you associate pleasurable emotional states with them. However, both types of people can engage in seduction, withdrawal, and hot and cold behavior to create these kind of compulsive chasing patterns and behaviors in their victims. So they pair this emotional anchoring with seduction and withdrawal, and it's part of that overall conditioning that makes you addicted to the predator. So let's say that a narcissist conditions you over time to associate them coming home with the sound of yelling, because as soon as they get into the house, they start yelling at you. They start insulting you, and you have been conditioned into remembering that and fearing that. And so what you tend to do is either you're already trying to please them by cooking them dinner, a lavish dinner beforehand, or you're you're finding ways to kind of cater to them early on and people please and walk on eggshells around them, and the narcissist has conditioned you to do this. So a pickup artist uses emotional anchoring for very specific purposes. They want to make you compete for them. They want to make you chase them. So they might pair a very blissful date, an otherwise blissful date, with a moment of coldness or comparison. They might triangulate you with someone, and you might not know what's going on and why they're doing this. And this hot and cold behavior is meant to make you chase. And they're doing this in order to create a sense of pain and pleasure and excitement and fear. All these emotions are associated with the biochemical addiction of love, and they know this. So they know that creating pain and pleasure will make them more memorable in your mind than creating just pleasure alone. Because again, we know from studying the biochemical bonding of victims and their abusers that dopamine does flow more readily to the brain when there is that intermittent reinforcement of periodic pleasurable moments interspersed throughout the abuse cycle, and that gets the victim more bonded to the perpetrator. So knowing the biochemical bonding process between abusers and their victims, this hot and cold method of both narcissists and pickup artists is quite understandable considering how significant of a bond it can create in the victim's mind. These seduction withdrawal methods, first kind of coming on very strong and then withholding and being cold, they are a way to get you biochemically bonded to the narcissist or the pickup artist, and so that you will be compelled to chase them. You will be compelled to try to satisfy them because you want to regain that honeymoon stage. You want to regain that idealization phase. Now, narcissists go one step further than pickup artists because they can pair anchoring with love bombing and punishment. What they tend to do is that they're sadistic. And so if you have a sadistic sociopath who can use emotional anchoring, what they can do is that they can try to associate your happy moments with cruel and unusual punishment. So let's say you got a raise at work. The narcissist will punish you with a covert put down or sabotage or a silent treatment right on the day of. Let's say you get pregnant and it's supposed to be a joyful time for you. The narcissist might ignore you for months while you're pregnant. While you're in this supposedly happy state, you're supposed to be enjoying one of the most happiest moments of your life, but the narcissist makes it into this kind of cruel and unusual punishment for you. And they make it a period of cruelty. And this is how they anchor you. This is how they anchor what used to be happy moments, what used to be sources of joy, with a sense of pain, with a sense of sabotage, with a sense of always waiting for the other shoe to drop. They can also access existing anchors in the past by reenacting a trauma that you've experienced and tapping into those same emotional states by re-triggering that experience. And for example, a narcissist who knows that you've been sexually assaulted might be more aggressive with you in bed after learning this fact. And they might do this in order to purposely trigger you and in order to reenact that anchor that's already existing within you of the trauma of being violated like this. Now, pickup artists use emotional anchoring in ways that pair them with pleasure. Of course, they can pair dates with pain in order to create that excitement and fear and that addiction. But usually when they are pairing their gestures, their sense, their voice tone with positive emotions and memories, they know that they're going to tap into this positive emotional state that you're in. And it's basically kind of like hypnosis. They're hypnotizing you into believing that all the pleasure that you're experiencing is from them. They're the source of pleasure. They're the source of joy. So let's say a pickup artist spontaneously kisses you in the middle of a date, and they tend to do this every time you're on a date. It starts to anchor this sense of romance, association of romance and spontaneity with the pickup artist, and you start to anticipate that whenever you're with the pickup artist, that you're going to get a sense of adventure or spontaneity, you're going to get romance, because you have this association with them, it's a lot harder to unanchor yourself and detach from someone like that, because they are a source of pleasure to you. Or you might have a very physical anchor. So a pickup artist might physically anchor you by creating this sort of gesture whenever they're speaking about a certain topic. And whenever, let's say you're talking about a happy memory together, then the pickup artist might do a specific gesture, or they might touch you on your knee every time you talk about this memory, so that whenever you're accessing that happy state and whenever you're thinking about that memory, you also remember the pickup artist, you remember the narcissist, you remember the predator, because they're associated in your mind with that positive, blissful state. So there are many different ways to anchor someone. Let's say a woman is wearing a specific scent, right? And it's a very alluring scent. Maybe it's the scent from, and her male partner learns to associate that scent with pleasure and with the woman. And that way, whenever he goes throughout life, he might remember, oh my God, that's what, Natasha smelled like, or that's her. He starts to associate that scent with her. The way that a pickup artist can learn to associate these memories, these positive, blissful states with them, and teach you to associate these positive emotional states with them, is that they might kiss you at certain locations. So they might take you whenever you are, near your apartment. They might kiss you there. They might kiss you at all the places near where you live, so that whenever you're walking by the neighborhood, you remember that. You remember each single place, and you learn to associate those locations with them. You can start to unanchor yourself by putting yourself back into that receptive, blissful state and remembering the association, remembering the trigger. Identify the compulsive behavior that you might have. If that you have a song that you associate with the narcissist or the pickup artist, and you remember this song vividly because you were in a very positive emotional state and you guys were slow dancing together to that song. So whenever that song comes up, you have this compulsion, this impulse to text them or to call them, even though you've broken up with them or you've detached from them. Now, this is how anchoring works, because if you are in a very receptive, positive, emotional state, and the narcissist or the pickup artist is able to pair that association with them in some way, then whenever you come across that same stimulus, which is the song, for example, it triggers that specific response, which is calling them, reaching out to them, because maybe you slow dance to that song and you remember that as a very romantic and happy moment in your life. And you remember, talking about that song with them afterwards, after the date. And so you learned to always communicate with them whenever you hear that song. To unanchor yourself, it's important to put yourself back into that receptive, positive state and start to anchor that song with something different. Maybe you work out to that song, or maybe you decide to remember the narcissist's true nature whenever you're listening to that song. And once you've started to unanchor yourself and start to associate these triggers with something different, you can start to detach more, because these anchors collectively can have an effect on you. They can cause you to become addicted to the narcissist or the pickup artist or whoever you may be dealing with. The last technique that they share, and I'm sure there's many more, but these are the 5 techniques that I discussed in my article, is their arsenal of sexual manipulation techniques. And these include Kino, Escalation, eye contact, the nice guy act, and the sexually liberated guy act. So manipulators who are looking only for sex are usually not going to say that straight up, right? Unless they're following a certain script in which they're trying to portray their dominance or assert their alpha male personality. So remember this. If someone is only looking for sex, they may try to dress up their intentions. This is the oldest game in the book, right? They will dress up their intentions and act like they're the nice guy, and that they never want to have sex with you. They might even pretend that they're not interested in rushing things at all physically, that they're not even interested in sex. They're just interested in getting to know you. And this is a line that they'll use in order to get inside your head and to make you feel like this is someone you could be worth investing in. You might even sleep with them because you believe that their intentions are pure and are not of someone who just wants that sexual satisfaction, that just wants a one-night stand. And this covert nice guy act is nothing new. Covert narcissists have been using this for decades. Players have been using this for decades in order to misrepresent their intentions and get what they want. But again, so we all know about the covert nice guy act and misrepresenting someone's intentions. But did you know that there's also another kind of ploy that they use called the sexually liberated guy act? And this is from pickup artistry. It uses a woman's experience of having been on the receiving end of sexual double standards and gender stereotypes and socialization in order to make her feel comfortable with the idea of having sex with the pickup artist. So let's say that Joshua, the pickup artist, is trying to get Natasha into bed, right? What he's going to do is he's going to use the sexually liberated guy act, which is he will tell Natasha something along the lines of, you know, I hate that women face such double standards in society when it comes to having sex. You know, they should be able to explore their sexuality and their bodies, just like men do, whether it's on the first date or the 9th date. Now, do you see where the manipulation is? He's basically trying to make her believe that she won't be shamed for having sex with him on a first date. Because if he's trying to get her to go home with him, he's going to try to disarm her into believing that he's the type of guy that would never judge a woman for going home with him on a first date. And so this is meant to make a woman feel psychologically comfortable with the idea of sex, of not being shamed for having sex on a first date. And it's a pickup artist tool that will enable the person, the pickup artist, to slyly get what they want, still communicating that, oh, I'm on your side. You know, I know what it's like to be a woman. It must be so rough having to deal with all of these sexual double standards all the time. And this is an interesting manipulation tactic, because if you're on the receiving end of such a tactic and nothing is holding you back from sleeping with them except those sexual double standards, you may actually fall prey to them. However, usually women have other reasons for not sleeping with someone on a first date besides sexual double standards. So if you are on the receiving end of this kind of manipulation tactic, be sure to communicate that and tell them firmly that it has nothing to do with sexual double standards. I'm just not comfortable with it. And hopefully they will either leave you alone and, you know, they realize that you've seen through their baloney, or they will redirect to a different manipulation tactic. Another thing that narcissists and pickup artists share in common is escalation, is testing of boundaries. And pickup artists do this with progressive touching, or what is known as Kino escalation. So what they'll do is, in the first few minutes of meeting you, they'll try to touch you in some way. They might touch your arm briefly and see how you react. If you pull away, they might de-escalate, and they might try a different maneuver. Or if you do seem comfortable with the idea of them touching you, they will move closer, and they might move on to grazing your knee or just progressively becoming more physically intimate with you. This is a way for them to ground themselves in your mind as someone who is a potential sexual partner. So when they're doing this, what they're doing is they're gradually testing your boundaries. And narcissists do this too, but in different ways. They don't just test your sexual boundaries, they test your psychological and emotional boundaries. So they might test you on a first date by giving you what I call the insult with a smile. They might give you a neg, a covert put down. They might make a crude sexual joke just to see how you react. Because if you react in a way that shows that you're compliant to them, that you are willing to please them, then they're going to move forward with even harsher tactics. And even if you show your discomfort, if you continue to engage with them on some level, they will believe that it's a way for you to say that you're still okay with their behavior. They will believe that it's an indication that you're still okay with their behavior, and they will continue to escalate because they know that you're still going to be engaging with them on some level, even if it's to show your discomfort or your outrage towards them for doing that. Another thing that they use is seductive eye contact. So they will maintain eye contact with you for a longer period of time than most, and this is meant to be a seductive way to establish that kind of addiction early on, because that does affect our biochemical bonding with a narcissist when they're maintaining these long periods of eye contact with us. But we know that narcissists and sociopaths actually create this kind of unflinching eye contact with us naturally and organically, and they don't need pickup artistry to do this, right? As Dr. Robert Hare, author of Without Conscience, writes in his book, many people find it difficult to deal with the intense, emotionless, or predatory stare of the psychopath. Normal people maintain close eye contact with others for a variety of reasons, but the fixated stare of the psychopath is more of a prelude to self-gratification and the exercise of power than simple interest or empathic caring. Some people respond to the emotionless stare of the psychopath with considerable discomfort, as if they feel like they're potential prey in the presence of a predator. So if you have someone who can stare at you without blinking, without looking away for several minutes, I would count that as a red flag, because normal people do tend to look away at some point, and they blink, and they are not able to maintain this kind of intense eye contact for so long. If you find yourself being stared down by someone like this, by someone who tends to be very superficially glib and charming and charismatic and seems a little bit too smooth, you might be dealing with a legit predator, not just a pickup artist. Because, you know, you can have pickup artists who try to maintain seductive eye contact, but it's going to look a bit different than a psychopathic stare. And psychopathic stare is going to make you feel like you're being devoured, as if you were prey. And psychopaths do have that stare. It doesn't have to be always intense and cold or reptilian. It can also look like they are fond of you. It can look innocent. It can look as if they are overwhelmingly, kind. But what you might be mistaking is that their psychopathic stare is anything but kind. It's actually a look of mischief. It's a look of amusement at playing with you, at toying with your emotions. So if you look carefully at a psychopath stare, they usually have a look of contempt on their face, even with that kind of amused expression. And it's because they're sadistic. It's because they know that they're getting away with whatever they're getting away with. So when they're looking down at you like this, they're practically devouring you, not just with their eyes, but with their methods. So to wrap this up, the big picture is that in order to resist being played, you have to learn the rules of the game, right? It's wise to brush up on narcissistic manipulation tactics, but also learn about pickup artistry, learn the techniques that people are using these days in order to hook you, in order to get you into bed and to mess with your head. Because if you learn these techniques early on, then you can identify them when they're happening, and you can start to either call them out or detach from the person who's using them, and you don't have to feed into their agenda, because these kind of manipulations can disarm you at first if you don't know what you're looking for. And if you don't know that you're having the wool pulled over your eyes, you won't realize that you're being conned and played, and that's exactly what the wolf in sheep's clothing is looking for. So if you want to learn more about the parallels between pickup artists and narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths, be sure to check out my in-depth article on these 5 techniques in the description box below. I will leave a link to the Psych Central article, which this video is based on. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Have you ever had any of these techniques used on you, or have you personally encountered them in some other context? Please do share your thoughts below, and let me know if you have any other techniques that you'd like to share that you learned about the pickup artistry world. Did your narcissist read books like The Art of Seduction or The Game, or was their manipulation a lot more organic, and did it stem from their own kind of natural psychology? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you all for all of your support, and I hope you're having a lovely, wonderful start to the new year. I'll talk to you guys soon, and until next time, take care. Be sure to check out my #1 best-selling book, Becoming the Narcissist Nightmare: How to Devalue and Discard the Narcissist While Supplying Yourself, a #1 bestseller in personality disorders. Also be sure to check out my book, Power: Surviving and Thriving After Narcissistic Abuse, a #1 bestseller in applied psychology.